Good morning and welcome to Sunday Square Off. I'm Bram Resnick. On today's show, reaction from two prominent Native Americans to President Trump's Pocahontas insult during a troubling ceremony honoring the Navajo code talkers. Teachers get peanuts, but the Ducey administration's handing out big raises to other government employees, and a new push to shine a light on dark money from anonymous campaign donors. But first, last week wasn't the first time President Trump used that Pocahontas insult.
Who, Pocahontas? Pocahontas? Well, no, look, she is it offensive? You tell me. Oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Well, sorry, but not sorry. That was Donald Trump campaigning a year and a half ago. President Trump used the insult again last week at that White House ceremony honoring Navajo code talkers, heroes who saved countless lives during World War II. But there was a lot more going on at that ceremony. Joining us now, Democratic State Representative Winona Benally and Alvina Begay, a professional runner and dietitian, both members of the Navajo Nation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Many Navajo, many others want to hear an apology from President Trump because of that ceremony. What do you want to hear from President Trump?
Well, certainly I would love to hear an apology, but I don't think we're going to get that. This is not the first time he's used this name to disparage others. Certainly, I mean, of course, his comments are aimed at Senator Warren, but the fact of the matter is it's disparaging. It needs to stop.
And Alvina, when you hear that, Pocahontas, it became a Donald Trump versus Elizabeth Warren story, but it's not that. It's more than that. When you hear Pocahontas, what does that say to you?
To me, it just tells me that President Trump does not respect women. He does not respect the historical importance of Pocahontas. And as Native American women, we are taught to respect women, and women are sacred in the Navajo. And
well, talk about the importance, because it's just become equated in a lot of people's minds with Elizabeth Warren, who has some of her own issues on that score. But tell us about the larger significance of Pocahontas in the culture.
Most folks, the image of Pocahontas that most people are familiar with is the image created by Hollywood, and that's not who she was.
And when you hear it, again, connected to Elizabeth Warren, does that feel like it's just missing the whole point to you?
For sure, definitely. I feel like it's a way for President Trump to take a jab at another political figure and insult Native Americans. And
so I mentioned at the top, there's a lot more going on in this whole picture, and I want to show behind the wall, or on the wall, behind the code talkers and President Trump there, that's President Andrew Jackson. He signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Thousands of Native Americans were forcibly moved off their tribal lands to the west. When you see an Andrew Jackson in that picture, Representative Benally, what does that say to you?
It tells me that there's just a complete lack of respect and ignorance of our history and our culture in this country. You know, Andrew Jackson pushed through the Indian Removal Act, which led to the Trail of Tears, and you know, it was a federal policy that affected all Indian tribes across the United States. It certainly was a federal legislation that resulted in the removal of our people from Arizona to New Mexico. And so it is a very painful part of our past that we wish not to revisit, certainly in a ceremony.
Can either of you just equate that with something maybe Anglos might understand? He was known as the Indian killer. Is there a comparable figure in, say, white culture or history?
Well, the fact that this particular act, the basis of it was to exterminate Indian people. And so I don't think it's too far-fetched to compare this to what has happened with Hitler and...
You compare this to a Hitler?
Yes.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. That's the first person that I think of as Hitler.
When you see that painting of Andrew Jackson inside the White House?
I do. That's exactly who I think of. I mean, there were so many other rooms in the White House. I've been into the White House, and I don't understand why that honoring of Navajo code talkers was in that particular room with that portrait in the background. So it's definitely.
And so how horrifying was that to you when you saw either saw this live or saw the video of it?
You know, our code talkers are revered war heroes, and for President Trump to honor our war veterans in that room is beyond words. It's beyond I don't even have any words to describe how I feel about that.
Do you think anybody in the White House even knew any of this?
I think so.
Really?
I do. I also question if President Trump knew, what the code talkers really did. He didn't. I mean, to have the ceremony in that room, to say what he said, he could have said something more positive to the code talkers, but instead he decided to take a jab at Senator Warren.
And why are the code talkers so important?
They helped save our country. They protected our country through our sacred language, and I feel like we would not be here if it weren't for our code talkers.
We've covered a lot of ground. Sum it up. What's the feeling you're left with? What do you want people to know about this ceremony that should really stick with them?
The comments that were made this past week were demeaning. They were degrading to Indigenous women across this country. And with the high rates of sexual violence against Native women, we've got to do better about respecting Indigenous women in this country.
Alvina?
Well, most Native American cultures, women are sacred and are supposed to be treated with utmost respect. So, I would just hope that, people remember that, women are givers of life and they're to be treated with respect.
All right. Representative Winona Benali, Alvina Begay, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you again.